All right, it is Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern. You know what time it is. It is time for a Sales Logic, the show where we dive into the strategies, everything that you need to know to sell more effectively in today's marketplace. I'm hanging out here with my partner, Mark Hunter. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning. It's 5 a.m. here in Portland, Oregon. It looks like it's going to be a great day. We got a great show planned. You ready for the topic? The topic is how great storytelling can close more deals. That's the show. And we got a great lightning round. I'll go ahead and tease it right now. Lightning round is top 10 ways to build your personal brand. And it does not include working out every morning, although that's something that we both recommend. So anyway. So, hey, tell me, how do great stories, how do they help you close more deals?
Well, I think storytelling is probably one of the most underutilized pieces of the sales process. I mean, I was just thinking about how often I speak at SKOs and how little storytelling is brought up. But at the end of the day, sales is emotional. It's always emotional. And if it's always emotional, stories speak to your emotions, right? They build connection. They take you out of communication mode and move you into connection mode.
Well, that's so true because it is emotional. And SKO, sales kickoff, you and I both speak at a lot of SKOs all the time. In fact, hey, if you haven't got your SKO speakers booked for next year, reach out. Mayor and I would be happy to come and participate. But here's the thing. SKOs are so many technical information. We're giving product information, giving product. The story is the emotional piece. It's the same thing with customers. Customers, I don't care whether it's B2B or B2C, buy emotionally. And if you can share a story that connects the customer, connects them to what it is that you're trying to do. And that doesn't mean you're the hero of the story. No. Now, there's a version that you can have as you be the hero, but it's if they can relate to it. If they can relate to it, then it's amazing at how much more emotionally they'll connect. And what will they do? They'll rationalize their decision to buy from you.
Yeah, the other thing I think about when I have somebody who's a great storyteller in sales is it helps me understand the concept. I think so often in sales, we talk about our product, we talk about our service and the value and the benefit it can bring to the customer, all of which is good, none of which you want to walk away from. But I don't really understand how it's going to be effective until you tell me a story of somebody who had a similar challenge to me, how you understood that challenge, how you used your product or service to meet that need, and then the outcome of it. And I think that stories take what is confusing to the customer and make it understandable to the customer.
Oh, that's so powerful. And what's interesting is the customer has to relate to it. Too many stories that I hear salespeople telling is the story of how their company is 75 years old. Their company's been around forever. And that's not a story. That's just plain stupid bragging. I mean, you have to be able to share a story that connects with the customer, they can relate to, and they emotionally feel part of. So spot on.
Yeah, I love what Jack Hubbard is saying here. Welcome, Jack, who's probably the king of sales and storytelling. It's got a wonderful statistic here that people remember 82% of what you tell in a story and 5% of the data that you present. Now, think about that. I was thinking, we were at dinner last night with some people and we were telling jokes. And I think about that and I think, why can you remember a joke? Because in essence, a joke is a story, right? And you can remember it, really remember it over time. I also think that stories give you credibility. You've shown and you've proven to me that your product or service can bring about the result that I need.
And they help to paint a visual picture. I think the reason we remember better is because a story helps to paint a visual picture. So this is why when you tell a story, you've got to take the time to use descriptive words that allow the person hearing it to picture themselves as being part of the story. Now, that means they can see themselves as the hero or they can see themselves as the victim. Now, if you paint them, if they see themselves as the victim, that's okay, as long as you have the good moral to the story, the good outcome. You don't want to leave them feeling as the victim and they're never going to get out of their situation. Remember, you're in sales. You're designed, your role is to help them get to a better level.
No, well, Terry, it is a fabulous topic, and we are gonna really dive into it today. I love what John Wong is saying here. When your story includes a referral, it makes the product and process relatable to the customer. Such a good topic. Like, what can you really weave into that story that will be valuable and helpful? Remember, they've learned, the decision making process is you're trying to get the customer to a point where they will make a decision, where they will move to action. And a story makes it really easy to move to action. Now, first of all, you've given me somebody else that's benefited from your product or your service. You've intimately shown me how you partner with somebody. And then the second is you've shown me the result that I will get, what I can expect from that.
That is so good, because if you think about it, when you give a referral, you undoubtedly describe why you're giving the referral. What's the reason? You're basically telling a story. See, customers tell stories all the time. When customers buy something that works, when customers buy something that doesn't work, what do? They tell somebody and they paint a story around it. You see, society is built on stories. Before we could write, what would we tell? We sat in the caves around campfires, and we told stories. That's exactly what this is. But the key is not to have the story be so overwhelming. Have you ever sat with a salesperson who just won't shut up? Because all they're doing is telling the story that goes on and on and on. So the story does have to be concise, which means I think you need to practice your story before you share it.
Yeah, you need to get it.
Otherwise, yeah.
So true. You need to get it as tight as possible. And again, what Terry Brock is saying here is that if the product or service, it needs to relate to you. I mean, it's like, don't tell a product about a Fortune 500 company if you're sitting there talking to a mom and pop. It will not, they might be intrigued by the story, they might be interested, but it doesn't have anything to do with them. And the story's really got to be relatable. It's got to be relatable not only in at least an adjacent industry. It's got to be, relatable in size, but most importantly, it's got to be relatable in problem.
See, you think about that salesperson who's dealing with a smaller business, smaller company, and telling this Fortune 500 story. What are they doing? It's braggadocious. All they're really doing is bragging on themselves as to how wonderful they are. That's not going to help you. That is not going to help you at all. That's actually going to slow the process, because you're actually going to wind up confusing the customer, because the customer is going to say, well, wait a minute, maybe he or she has a solution that doesn't fit for my business, because they're used to working with bigger businesses. This is why the story has to be tailored, has to be shaped and fit so that the customer can relate to it and connect to it.
Where do you think salespeople find good stories?
Just by doing their job, you find them in daily life. This brings up an interesting point, because should salespeople tell other people's stories? No, don't tell other people. Very few people can do that. I've tried that on sales calls occasionally over the years. Never works. You got to tell your own story. Why? Because it also helps you create credibility. It helps you be seen as, oh, you've gone down this path. You've understood this. You've gone through this experience. So we encounter stories all the time. And it's a matter of which ones do we choose to share. I think a good salesperson has to have a library, a catalog of 20 or 30 different stories. There may be 3 or 4 that they use predominantly because of the type of product they sell, type of customer they sell, and how it works. But there's still another 15 or 20 that they could wind up breaking into and using if the opportunity lends itself.
Yeah, I love what Natalie is saying here. Listening is key to storytelling. As a podcast host, I focus on guiding the speaker to share information that is helpful and resonates. So true, Natalie. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I was watching my own behavior, and I did not pay attention until a story was told. It was the only times when I was going back and forth listening to the person. In fact, it had such an impact on me that I'm looking at my keynotes now, and I'm just really thinking I need to almost include more storytelling in those, because that is really when we connect, and that is really, really when we relate. I'm going to say, I think something in today's marketplace that's really important is that is that your stories really have to be unique to the situation. So I can tell you, as a sales professional, as an entrepreneur, I keep a catalog right here on my desk. I have a notepad, and on this notepad, I just jot down questions customers ask me all the time. I was in a sales training Wednesday, and Wednesday I was just taking notes like crazy of what people were asking me. And I'll go back and I'll write blogs about that. I'll shoot videos about that. But I I'll come up with a story for those. And immediately when somebody asks me a question, where I try to trip my brain is to think, what is a story that I have that can connect to that? Because that's what's going to make sense, right?
Oh, it sure does. Hey, we need to get to the question. The question is along the same vein. It comes from Lisa in Austin, Texas. She writes, this year I've been trying to make my presentations more engaging. How do I know if my story is connecting or if I'm just talking too much? Great question, right? Because some people tell stories and they shut up. Please. What's your thought on that?
Well, I think that Jack Hubbard gives us a great insight here. He said, when you begin a story with your situation reminds me of, you land something into the life of the buyer that they can relate to. So there's a couple of things I think, for our friend from Austin, Texas. Number one, see if they're listening. Like, you really need to be focused on them. And if they're the slightest bit distracted, it's not paying, they're not relating at all. The other is when you debrief the sales call. I mean, if you didn't get action out of it, your story didn't connect and it didn't relate. And that's okay. I mean, we're throwing mud at the wall. You should be, you should be relating to that and thinking about that and debriefing every single sales call. But if you're not getting a response, if they don't ask questions after the story, if they're not more intrigued after the story, they weren't paying attention. It wasn't relatable.
Well, and this is where you can begin to see what is their body language, whether it be on a Zoom call, Teams call, in person, whatever. Even on the phone, you can begin to hear what's their tonality, what is happening. Because again, if they're not connecting, they're not relating to it. One of the things that I detest about stories and is when people are just making stuff up. I love when I tell a story, I want to tell a couple of very precise facts. I want to put some facts in there. Numbers. It was 4.2 or something, or this 16 or something. Because again, I want people to understand. Because when I tell a story, my credibility is on the line. When anybody tells a story, your credibility is on the line. And if you're just making this up and you're just blowing smoke, you absolutely defeat your credibility. So storytelling is a way that you can genuinely increase your level of integrity by the customer seeing, wow, this actually did happen. This is real. He's not, smoking dope and jumping rope.
Yeah, I love what Natalie is saying here. So the storytelling has to be conversational and bring the person into the conversation. That's so important too, because if you're just talking at people when telling a story, rather than bringing them in, I'm thinking about a story that I told the other day, and we were talking about whitewater rafting, and I just said, have you ever been whitewater rafting? And they were like, yeah. And I said, well, remember when you talked to the guide? And I mean, so to Natalie's point, I was bringing them into the story, which I think goes along so well with what Jack was saying. Is it reminds me of, it didn't sound like, oh, we're at the transition part of the sales call and now it's time for me to tell a story.
Yeah, it's funny because stories also fit in different places on a sales call. I think of a sales call I had the other day. There was a company that called me, reached out to me, and they had a New Jersey phone number. I recognized it immediately because I used to live in New Jersey, and called him back. And it was a gentleman. He answered the phone, a VP of sales. And I said, and this is kind of gutsy. I said, hold on, before we get any further, Giants or Jets? Happened to be on a Monday morning, right after the Giants and the Jets had played. Now, I know, Mary, you can't relate to this because it's football. And he immediately joked. He immediately laughed. He said, Giants, of course. I said, okay, now we can have a conversation. And it was so funny because then he immediately told me a story about a recent Giants game that he was at the Meadowlands. He told me a story. And it was interesting, but then I told him a little story and he connected it. And we realized that I used to live right near where he lives now. And it was interesting, but through almost relatable stories, we were connecting a relationship even before we got into the sales call. Now, was that gutsy? Yeah, it was a little gutsy, but I don't care. I just could sense that this was going to work out. And it did work out. It worked out very well. Flip side, you can use a story to emphasize a feature, a benefit that you have. But you also can use a story just before you close, because you paint a little story and then you describe the pain and anguish that the company has. And because this is why you're there. This is what you're trying to help them solve. And then you go for the close. You set it up with a story. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy for thinking about it. We've had a question about how do you develop the skill of storytelling, and I love the way that this was asked because it definitely is a skill of storytelling. Gina, thrilled that you are a big believer in storytelling for business because it definitely belongs in business. But Ali has asked how to develop the skill of storytelling.
I think you develop the story just by taking the time to listen and relax. Listen and relax and think about what it is that you're having. You're not having a lecture with the other person. You're having a conversation. How would this conversation go if you were sitting, the two of you in a room? I happen to be sitting in a room and there's a fireplace right here in front of me. And we're just having a casual conversation. That is what's absolutely key. If what you are going in with this locked in presentation, locked in mentality, you're never going to be able to know when to put a story in or know how to tell a story. You got to be relaxed.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also think that there's the major components of good storytelling, right? I mean, you got a couple of seconds to get me to want to pay attention. So you got to think about that opening line, that why would I pay attention? And you better put that pretty high up. And then the story needs a hero, which in this area needs to be the customer. They need to be the hero, whether it's the customer in front of you or the customer they can connect and they can relate to. So even though you solved the problem, you're not the hero. They are, like Mark had said. And then you have to have challenge and conflict. And the challenge and conflict would be the exact same problem that they are facing. They can't increase sales, or, they're struggling with supply chain issues, whatever it is that your problem solves. Then the turning point, how you got them off the challenge, how what it did to turn things around, and then the resolution, the result. So I think it's important. I think it's really good to write your stories out, to just get it out how you would tell the story in a conversational manner. And then you've got to tighten that story, but it's got to have a hook. It's got to have a hero. It's got to have conflict. It's got to have, it's got to have a turning point. It's got to have resolution. I think that's kind of Donald Miller's framework for how to tell a good story.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that doesn't mean you are not part of the story. You
Right.
can certainly be part of the story. It's just don't make yourself the hero. And this is where I think so many salespeople go wrong, because they want to paint themselves as the picture and they want to startle the customer. 18 people were on the verge of dying until I rescued them from the side of a cliff. No, I'm sorry. That doesn't work. That does not work. You can be part of the story, but the hero is absolutely key. Before you tell a story, ask yourself two questions. Who's the hero and what's the hook? And if you can't address those, don't tell the story.
Yeah, and I think, if I remember correctly, I think Donald Miller says that you are 100% in the story, but you're the guide. So,
Yes.
I'm going to make Mark the rock star, but I'm going to show him the path on how to get there. And that's how you tell the customer that you have the tools and the resources. I was just writing an article for Top Sales Magazine on how to use AI to overflow your sales pipeline. And I told a story. I mean, that's because I thought, oh my God, there's a million articles on AI. Everybody has the top 5 AI tools. I got to do something different. So I wrote the whole thing in story form. And when I wrote it in story form, I'm helping a sales professional who's been a top performer, who's struggling, get back on top. And we're using AI to do it. And I'm the guide. She's the hero. She's the rock star. She's going to come back out on top. But we're talking about the things that we did together, me as her coach, in order to do that. So it's really important. If you don't know Donald Miller, Kelly Swanson, You have Kendra Hall with Stories That Stick. Read a book or two on it because it's good. It's really, really good information.
Yeah, in fact, we're going to get to the book in just a second because it's key. Because when you're the guide, now they can see how you're going to help them, and that's what's
Right.
key. Because ultimately, the story is designed to do one of two things: either to show them that they got such a problem they need to find a way to solve it, and or you are the solution to help them doing it. But not because you're the hero, but because you're the guide. So anyway, hey, our book this week comes from Kendra Hall. You mentioned her name; she is absolutely fantastic. Her book, Stories That Stick. Yes. We need to include more stories. Highly recommend the book. I don't know. You got some thoughts on the book?
Yeah.
I love Kendra's weekly email she sends out. I love it.
Yeah. I haven't read the book in a long time, and I actually, truth be told, was looking on ChatGPT for recommendations, and it popped this one up. I read the book back when she spoke at Influence, probably like a million years ago at the National Speakers Association. But it's, that's the point of a story, right? The point of a story is to get it to get it to stick. And she really lays out a framework and she lays out a model. Again, I think, Story Brand by Donald Miller is great. Kelly Swanson is phenomenal, has a great online course around around storytelling. So I think those things just are, if you're not currently using storytelling, I mean, I think in today's marketplace too, I think the one thing we've forgotten to mention is stories make you likable. They people just, think about going to a dinner party. Thank God for people who tell jokes and thank God for people who tell stories, because other than that, the evening is kind of dull and it's kind of boring. So people get in there and they start telling their stories. Last night at dinner where we were telling these jokes, we all started talking about, what it was like growing up in our parents' house. We were all from really big families and, kind of the kids all the way down the pipe where your parents were just exhausted by the time you showed up. And it was hilarious. I mean, we were all laughing and telling stories. So stories are really, really powerful, but they make you relatable as well. And I love what Andy's saying here, that stories are history presented in a visual or in an auditory manner.
Yeah. So what you were doing is you were redoing the Progressive insurance commercials for those of you who watch a lot of television. Right. Anyway, but hey, here's something real quick before we get into lightning round. Emotionally, you have to be engaged. I mean, you have to be able to share the story with body language, with emotional tonality. You have to be engaged, because if all you're doing is reading the story essentially or pulling it off from memory, it doesn't work. You have to be part of the story. So anyway, hey, great conversation this morning. Great audience this morning. Lightning round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Top 10 ways to build your personal brand. Go.
Number one, define your personal brand. If you have not really decided how people want to view you, you better write it down and get clear on it.
Number two, include stories as part of your personal brand. Just like you're writing an article and you're doing it as a story, that allows people to see you as a human.
Yeah, before you promote your personal brand, live your personal brand. If you decide that you want to be seen as successful, that you want to be somebody who's disciplined, adopt those skill sets before you start promoting those skill sets.
And that means you have to be consistent both when you're selling and when you're not selling, consistent when you're working and when you're not working. You have to be consistent, because it's going to show through very quickly.
Yeah, find different ways and different mediums to promote your personal brand. Shoot videos, put some things on LinkedIn, but include your personal brand as a part of it.
Realize that your personal brand is a long-term build. It's going to take a long time to build your personal brand, but it also means that you can destroy it in a moment by doing the wrong thing. So play the long game, stay focused.
Yeah, I would say also you need to figure out what your brand is right now so you know where the gaps are. I would talk to a few top customers, talk to your friends, and say, what are the top 5 or 6 ways that you would describe me? What do you think of when you think of me? And whatever that is, that's your personal brand. And then figure out what the gap is to that you've got to close.
Number 8, your personal brand is also who you associate with. It is amazing how you become known by who you associate with. Pick your friends carefully.
Yeah, the last one I'm going to say is that focus on your personal brand every single day. I read mine first thing in the morning. It's part of my morning goals and part of my morning meditation, but I intentionally decide to be that person, because the person that I want to be with my personal brand is not always who I wake up to.
Number 10, your personal brand is also who you impact and who you influence. If you're not willing to share and give to other people, then that's going to impact your personal brand. Because again, we are a society of people. It's got to be out there helping people, which is what we've been doing here this morning on Sales Logic Podcast. If you like what you hear, subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. If something we've said has earned you a single dollar, consider telling a friend about our show, because it's how we grow when we help you grow. I'm Mark Hunter.
And I'm Meredith Elliott Powell.
Remember, when you sell with confidence and integrity,
all of this uncertainty suddenly becomes your competitive advantage.
And the sale becomes logical.
All right. You all were a rock star audience this morning. Thanks for getting up early. Thanks for talking about one of our favorite topics, sales. We'll see you right back here next week for another episode of Sales Logic. Until then, go close a deal.